How many members of this coalition support what you're talking about, a new challenged, a new vice presidential nominee, and what's the process? How far are you in the process for actually forcing that to the floor? Because the RNC, what we saw is protests that were easily stopped by the person holding the gavel.
Yes, the question of how many in the Bernie Delegates Network are tuned to perhaps protesting conceivably about the VP choice and so forth. When we surveyed 10 days ago to Bernie Delegates Network members about potential VP choices, and of course we included Senator Kaine there at that time, one of the questions toward the end of the survey said, if the vice presidential pick of Secretary Clinton is either Kaine or some of the others we listed, or similar political outlook, would you seriously consider vocally denouncing the pick and or, as we called it, nonviolently and emphatically, that was the term, nonviolently and emphatically protesting during the acceptance speech of Secretary Clinton on the convention floor. And the vast majority chose and or, either said one or the other or both. So that's a basic inclination. The other part of the question, what do we plan now? We're going to be very quickly doing yet another straw poll, and by the way, it's done so that every delegate has a unique URL, can only vote once, but we are going to be surveying within the next 24 hours exactly what plans the delegates might get behind in terms of responding.
The procedure for doing this. Do you know the procedure for doing this yet? Getting enough votes? How many votes do you need? How to do it?
Well, you mean officially within the DNC? Well, we've read the rules, and of course we would hope that the rules would be followed. I mean, what's theoretical, the neutrality of the DNC was theoretically in existence throughout this campaign. We now know through the email leaks provided by WikiLeaks that was a total fiction. So I say that the caveat, but when we read the rules of the DNC in this convention, if we gather 300 signatures with no more than 50 from any particular state, then we can place in nomination the name of a vice presidential potential nominee, and then we would go through that entire process. Donna, did you want to add anything?
If Bernie asked you to step
people
down,
should identify what news outlet they're with.
Yes,
sure,
please.
Robin with the Omaha World Herald in Nebraska. If Bernie should ask you to step down and to stop your protest on the VP pick, would you?
The question is if Bernie Sanders would ask us to, as you put it, step down and not protest the VP pick, would we? Well, the answer is very much bound up in my explanation in the beginning that the Bernie Delegates Network is totally independent of Bernie Sanders and the campaign. Let me make it very clear that as a coordinator of Bernie Delegates Network and also every other delegate I've talked to who's a Bernie delegate, none of us have ever heard from Bernie Sanders or any of the official campaign that they want us to protest or that they don't want us to protest. If we get such a message, directly or indirectly, I'm sure we'll take it under advisement as we take all advice and opinions under advisement, no more or no less. Donna, did you want to?
In terms of Progressive Democrats of America, now I'm not speaking for the Bernie Delegate Network, put on my other hat. The Progressive Democrats of America have no intention of standing down at this point. We brought Bernie Sanders to this party, so to speak, and we intend to be there. I think that Bernie was very serious when he used the hashtag, and we all use the hashtag not me, us. We take that seriously. He talked about this is about building movement. And for those of you who may have been there, we had a fabulous People's Summit in Chicago a few weeks ago, in which we had thousands of people come together for just the purpose of movement building. We had a fantastic sponsorship by National Nurses United and 190,000 registered nurses in this country who came together to say it isn't about Bernie Sanders the person, it's about a movement, it's about justice, it's about making sure we achieve the progressive change we want to have. Bernie has been a tremendous vehicle to bring that agenda to the American public, and the American public has embraced it, really embraced it. And we always stood that way for Progressive Democrats of America. We intend to continue. I think in terms of the vice presidential pick, we do know the process. To answer more specifically, there has been outreach to specific individuals about their willingness or non-willingness to put themselves in that light. As you might imagine, there is often fear of retribution. And I think that's very real, unfortunately, in our political system today. Certainly we see the most egregious examples of that on the Republican side with Donald Trump, when he very directly threatens people and the press and others on what will happen if they don't sing the tune that he wants sung. The DNC may have its own ways, as we're finding out through WikiLeaks and so forth. And so there may be fear on the part of some people, but rest assured there are people who are unafraid. Thank you.
And briefly on that note, this prefigures the future. If there's a President Clinton and a Hillary Clinton administration, there's not a nanosecond of honeymoon, because principals don't take a nap, they don't go on holiday. So this prefigures what we anticipate in the future. Yes.
Hi, Sally Kipp with First Television. If you could talk a little bit about what a floor protest would look like, what are some of the options?
The question is, talking about a floor protest, what some of the options are. Well, Donna may want to address this as well. We've heard many possibilities discussed by delegates. Again, our Delegates Network is reflecting a lot of that discourse going on. There's talk about walking out of the vice presidential or presidential acceptance speech. There's talk about total silence, remaining seated, turning backs. It's all a quest to galvanize and walk in the footsteps of the long tradition of nonviolent protests for social justice in this country. I'd like to mention that in 1964, at the Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, the Democratic administration in the White House tried very hard to suppress the voice of somebody who had suffered from social injustice. And the rationale was that that would hurt the party and help to elect Barry Goldwater, just as we're hearing similar rationales today about we should sit down and shut up because that will help Donald Trump. On the contrary, the help of Donald Trump is coming from Hillary Clinton and choosing someone who is actually backing up the Wall Street support from the Democratic Party that's such a target for Trump. But back in 1964 in Atlantic City at the convention, when we look today at the voice of Fannie Lou Hamer, who said on behalf of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, we didn't come all this way for no 2 seats, when the racist delegation of the regular Mississippi Party was to retain all of their dozens of seats. Very few of our delegates have suffered the terrible abuse that Fannie Lou Hamer did at the time as a civil rights activist in the Deep South, but there's an understanding that you have to sacrifice, and sometimes when the top of the party tells you to be quiet, it's important to let your light shine, it's important to speak up and speak out, and in the light of history that is upheld. Yes, other questions? Yes. Could you identify yourself, please?
Catherine Lucy with the Associated Press. Are you also looking floor fights on rules, on platform, or protesting anyone else who's in attendance?
The question is, are we also considering floor fights in terms of rules, in terms of platform? Well, late yesterday, the Rules Committee, after a lot of deliberations, seems to have come up with a quote-unquote compromise which might obviate or remove the need for a floor fight. That remains to be seen around superdelegates. In terms of platform, there is no minority report, as far as I'm aware, that's been formally put forward. At the same time, there are efforts underway. I don't know if, Donna, you want to address that as well, around climate issues and so forth. In terms of what a floor fight might entail, again, we're committed to nonviolence. We're committed to the long tradition of activism that speaks out for social justice, and that remains to be seen. We're going to continue to poll and survey our members.
Thank you, Norman. I think the other thing that's important.
We are going to leave this and go live now to hear from senior Democratic campaign and convention officials at the DNC for a press briefing this morning in Philadelphia, previewing the day's events.
Robbie Mook, and National Press Secretary for Hillary for America, Brian Fallon. They will speak. We'll take some questions, and then I'll come up and do some housekeeping and logistics stuff at the end.